Let us now take another example based on model number 1, which is about conclusions. The given statements here are: some rivers are hills, no hill is taxi, all taxis are buses. And the conclusions are: some buses are rivers, some taxis are rivers, and the last conclusion is no bus is river. So based on these statements, we need to find out which of these conclusions are definitely true. Let us first try to draw the basic diagram for the given statements. The first statement here is: some rivers are hills. So some rivers are hills can be taken as shown here. These are the rivers, and there is a overlapping between rivers and hills. So we can say that these are the rivers which are hills. The second statement is: no hill is a taxi. So no hill is a taxi can be drawn as shown. There is no overlapping between hills and taxis. But while drawing the basic diagram itself, we need to understand that the taxis can also be taken on the other side. For example, we can also take the taxis in this manner. Even in this case, we find that no hill is a taxi. The only difference here is, in the first case, there is no overlapping between rivers and taxis, but in the second case, we find that taxis and rivers overlap each other. So that is how, while drawing the basic diagram itself, we need to visualize the various other possibilities. The third statement here is: all taxis are buses. So all taxis are buses can be taken in this way. All taxis are buses. And if we try to take all taxis are buses here, it can be taken as shown. So these are the taxis which are buses. Let us now see which of these conclusions are true. The first conclusion is: some buses are rivers. Now if we go by the basic diagram, we find that there is no overlapping between buses and rivers. But if we take the second diagram into consideration, buses and rivers overlap each other. Why? Because this larger circle represents buses and rivers is as shown. So definitely some of the buses are rivers. But because the conclusion should be true in all the cases, here we can say that conclusion number 1 is false, because it is true in the second case but not in the first case. So conclusion number 1 is false. The second conclusion here is: some taxis are rivers. So if you go by the basic diagram, there is no overlapping between taxis and rivers. But if we take the taxis as shown by the red circle, we find that definitely some of the taxis are rivers. So this second conclusion is true again in the second case but not in the basic diagram. So again it can be taken as false, because conclusion must be true in all the cases. And the last conclusion here is: no bus is a river. Now if you go by the basic diagram, buses and rivers do not overlap each other. So we can say that no bus is a river. But if we take the bus as shown here, we find that there is an overlapping between buses and rivers. So again we find that the last conclusion, no bus is river, is true in the first diagram, that is the basic diagram, but it fails in the second diagram. So conclusion number 3 is also false. So friends, as we can see here, all the 3 conclusions given here are false either in the first diagram or in the second diagram. But then if we try to observe the conclusion number 1, that is some buses are rivers, and the conclusion number 3, no bus is a river, forms a complementary pair. We know that some A's are B's and no A is B is a complementary pair. So if we try to check these complementary pairs of conclusions from these 2 diagrams, we find that each of these conclusions is either true in one of the cases or in the other case. For example, if we take the first conclusion, that is some buses are rivers, you see that some buses are rivers fails in the basic diagram, but it is true in the second case. Why? Because here we find that some of the buses are rivers. So conclusion 1 is true in the second diagram, but it fails in the first diagram. But if we go for the complementary pair, that is the third conclusion, no bus is river, we find that no bus is river is true in the basic diagram, but it fails in the second diagram. So we very well understand that the buses can either be taken as shown here or as shown in the second case. So if we take the buses to be this one, we find that one of the conclusions is true, that is no bus is river is true. But if we take the buses as shown here, we find that some buses are rivers is true. So we can say that either conclusion 1 or conclusion number 3 has to be true. So the answer here should be either conclusion 1 or 3 should be true. Why? Because there are 2 possible cases to take buses. Either it can be taken in the basic diagram as shown here or as shown here. So if we take this one of the conclusions is true, and if we take the second one, the other conclusion is true. So here the answer should be either 1 or 3 is true. So again friends, as you can see, we need to go for the basic diagram, but at the same time check from the various other diagrams whether these conclusions are true or false. And whenever the given conclusions have got a complementary pair, like this, some buses are rivers and no bus is a river, we need to be careful and check whether these are true in either one or the other case.